The final phase of the battle for the Scheldt Estuary is Operation Infatuate, the assault on the island of Walcheren. As I've said before, the Germans had heavily fortified it and reinforced it with at least 100,000 men plus large radar-controlled guns. So to take this island, it would be an attack from 3 areas. Now this would all kind of merge in, so it wouldn't be waiting for one to follow the other, but the Canadians would attack across a small causeway that links South Beveland to Walcheren called the Scheldt Causeway. It's about 1 kilometre long at the longest. It's not particularly wide, but it has a road and rail link. Unfortunately, you can't put tanks over there because the land either side is too muddy for tanks, but there's not enough water for an assault by boat. Now, if you took tanks across, the Germans, who were obviously prepared with their 88mm guns and other anti-tank guns, are going to pick these tanks off. So the only way across this will be infantry. The other will be a smaller amphibious assault from the port of Breskin to a place called Flushing, again pronounced in the Dutch Vlissing. This will be done by the 4 Commando, the King's Own Scottish Borderers and the Royal Scots. And finally, a large assault, amphibious assault, supported by battleships. So the scene is set for the final part of the battle for the Scheldt Estuary, the assault on the heavily defended island of Walcheren. To demonstrate just how vicious this battle was, we're going to use a clip from a fairly new film called The Forgotten Battle, a Dutch-Belgian cooperation, filmed recently and is available to watch on Netflix, and I do recommend it. And it shows brilliantly this attack by the Canadian Infantry on the Scheldt Causeway. And as we see the clip starting now, it shows the Germans with their 88mm guns and heavy machine guns. It shows the Canadians covered in mud and the brutality of this battle. So, how the battle goes. Initially, the Black Watch infantry advanced so far down the causeway but are stopped by withering fire. But managed to get themselves into a bit of a hole, a kind of ditch left by either a previous explosion or dug. But they used that as a kind of a forward post. The Cavalry Regiment, using typical infantry tactics, then pushed through and pushed further down the causeway, but again was stopped by withering fire. By this time, lights fading, so they decided to change tactics and wait for nightfall. After nightfall, they attacked again, this time literally on their bellies, throwing grenades, using their automatic Tommy guns and Sten guns and Bren guns and Lee Enfield rifles to move forward inch by inch, foot by foot, yard by yard, eventually getting to the end of the causeway. Then the French Canadian Regiment, the Maisonneuve, they push through and actually get themselves a bit of a beachhead at the other side, or bridgehead at the other side of this causeway. But the Germans did counterattack and forced them back a little bit, but not all the way back, and the Canadians held their ground on this causeway. To relieve this situation, they put in a small assault about 2 kilometres south by boat onto the island of Walcheren and then advanced north to take the pressure off the Canadians, who by now had fortified their positions on the Scheldt Causeway. Early November, as the Canadians are fighting on the Scheldt Causeway, the Allies put a smaller amphibious landing from the port of Breskin across to the small port of Flushing on the island of Walcheren. This will be number 4 Commando, an army commando, supported by the King's Own Scottish Borderers and the Royal Scots. The Canadians had put vast amounts of artillery at Breskin, and it's from Breskin to Flushing is not very far, so they were within range of their medium artillery, 25 pounders or 5.5 inch, and they pounded the town of Flushing as the assault force went in. After 2 days of bitter street fighting, the number 4 Commando, King's Own Scottish Borderers and Royal Scots had forced the Germans out the town of Flushing. And while the Canadians were still fighting hard on the Scheldt Causeway, the main assault would now take place onto the town of Westkapelle, just further up the coast north from the port of Flushing. Some weeks before, the Royal Air Force did themselves a bit of dam busting by attacking the dam areas of Walcheren, thus flooding the interior part of the island. Now, the capital of Middelburg is on slightly higher ground. This was done on purpose, so the British could purposely use, or the Allies, this LVT-4 Amtrak in these interior parts. Now, the main force that will be attacking Westkapelle, this main amphibious force, was being gathered at Ostend. This was quite a large force. It was number 4 Special Service Brigade of the Royal Marines, comprising 4-1 Commando, 4-7 Commando, 4-8 Commando, and number 10 Independent Commando, which were a volunteer unit mainly comprising of Norwegian and Belgian volunteers. It would also be backed up by 3 large Royal Navy ships. The famous battleship Warspite that had been fighting since World War I, took part in the Battle of Jutland and many famous operations during the Second World War, including D-Day, would be the lead battleship of this assault force. It would be supported by 2 strange craft called monitors. Now, those who don't know what a monitor is, it's kind of a medium-sized cruiser. There's not a lot of guns on it apart from 1 single large battleship turret. So it's basically a floating turret used for sea-to-land support of invading forces. And they were the monitors HMS Roberts and HMS Erebus. Also supporting this amphibious group would be a unit called the SSEF, standing for Support Squadron Eastern Flank. This was formed before D-Day. This is specialist landing craft, not for landing troops on, of course, just carrying weapons. So these craft, which are basically large craft, LCTs, landing craft tanks, will be equipped with either howitzers and artillery weapons, flat guns, rockets and other such weapons. And they will be placed on the flanks of this invading force to help get him into the beach, because again, due to poor weather, there wouldn't be a lot of air support. So the final assault at the island of Walcheren by the main assault force. Because of lack of air power, the SSEF, the Support Squadron Eastern Flank, may have to be sacrificed. And as they were in close, firing their weapons, they soon brought the attention of the large German radar-controlled guns, who soon started pounding this force, and they took quite heavy losses. I think there's about 30 landing craft in the SSEF. 9 were sunk, 11 were badly damaged, causing hundreds of casualties amongst this unit. But their sacrifice was not in vain. In gaps caused by RAF bombing in the dams, the main assault force managed to get some of their LCTs through and started offloading. Now, from these LCTs came the LVT-4s that we've been talking about earlier on, plus large army bulldozers, which would be really useful in this area, tanks with bulldozers on, mine-clearing tanks and other vehicles from the famous 79th Army Division, also known as Hobart's Funnies, which would be crucial for the fighting in Walcheren. Now, once ashore, after bitter fighting, the commandos would go to their various objectives. Things like taking out the weapons, these large radar control guns. Now, obviously the battleships, Warspite and the monitors Erebus and Roberts, had pounded the hell out of these guns. So by the time the commandos got there, they were fairly well subdued. Now, the commandos then moved north to a place round the top of Walcheren, to a place called Doomburg, and captured that fairly quickly. And also commandos were coming down south to meet their comrades at Flushing, and eventually fought the way around to the slowdown where they met the 52nd Division, who'd done another assault, amphibious assault on South Beveland, and came across with the Canadians. Over the central flooded areas of Walcheren, the LVT-4s would be the ideal vehicle to take the Royal Scots over this area towards the capital city of Walcheren, Middelburg, where a lot of the German forces had gathered. Yet again, the German forces were unfamiliar with this vehicle, and as soon as these vehicles started to come out of the water and onto the areas of Middelburg, soon were radioing to their commanding officers, "We're under attack by heavy tank attack." They were not tanks, but they were not to know that, and soon were starting to surrender. So the Middelburg, I think, fell fairly quickly. The fighting on Walcheren didn't last a huge amount of time, and the last German resistance was on the 8th of November. Now, our old friend Admiral Bertram Ramsay is back in the fore, because he was kind of confident that the Allies were going to take this island, and by the 4th of November, after they'd silenced the guns, he started bringing his mine clearing vessels down the Scheldt Estuary to start the mine clearing process. Now, it took about 10 days to clear the mines down the Scheldt Estuary, and the first ship managed to get into the port of Antwerp on the 28th of November, and quite apt, it was a Canadian ship. You know, the much sacrifice that the Canadians had done on this battle, it was quite apt that the first ship into the port of Antwerp would be Canadian. I cannot remember its name, but it was nice that it was a Canadian ship. It was actually a Canadian-built version of the Liberty ship. This battle was huge. It resulted in 40,000 casualties, about roughly half the Germans and half the Allies. The Canadians suffered huge amounts. In fact, Canadian infantry was decimated and almost broken until the end of the war. Top this off, the Germans lost another 41,000 prisoners of war. And now the Allies had got access to Antwerp, and the great push into Germany could begin. The port of Antwerp wouldn't become fully operational until about the middle of December. And in part 4, we're going to look at the aftermath of this battle and the true cost to the Allies of their indecision early in September not to go for the battle for the Scheldt Estuary.